I'm Hannah Frost in Digital Library Systems and Services at Stanford Libraries. I lead a group of product and service managers and work a lot on the Stanford Digital Repository.
And I'm Amy Hodge. I'm the Science Data Librarian for Stanford Libraries. My position is with the Science and Engineering Librarians group, but I work a lot with Hannah and with other people over in the Digital Library group.
We have some new people coming in. Great, welcome, come on in. So Amy and I were here 3 summers ago, we figured out. And a lot has happened in the SDR in some ways in the last 3 years. We've got some more things to come, but so we're here to tell you about some of the new stuff that's come with the SDR in that time. I will start with an overview of what the SDR is, who uses it, and the kinds of things that we're seeing happening. And then we'll go through some of these new and or really popular aspects of the SDR. So the SDR is a repository system designed for the management, publishing, and preservation of digital content at Stanford. It was developed at Stanford Libraries, and it's supported by a team of engineers, operations staff, product managers, and service managers to serve people across our campus and our community in order to address a primary overarching concern. And that concern is that without continued intentional management over the long term, digital information will not remain accessible. What do I mean by that? Well, I think you've all been out on the web and found links that are dead, that lead to nothing. Software that you've come across files that you don't have the software to open up that file. DVD drives, you don't have one in your laptop anymore, but you might have content on a DVD. The SDR is a system and a set of services that plays a really vital role in maintaining the continuity of access to Stanford's digital assets over the very long term. So I talked about how we work with all corners of our campus, and I found this map in our collection of maps and architectural drawings that shows that Stanford actually has some corners, actually. This is just one example of the kinds of collections that are coming into the SDR. We've been working in a partnership with LBRE, the Lands, Buildings, and Real Estate Group, to digitize various collections in university archives containing thousands of maps and architectural drawings of the buildings and lands on campus, but also around campus. LBRE was very motivated, so we've been partnering with them. They help to pay for the work that digitizes these physical materials, to bring them into the SDR, to describe them and make them discoverable through SearchWorks, which is our library catalog. And the digitization services is a really important part of the SDR's overall kind of strategy and mission. I mean, obviously they're complementary. Through the digitization of physical things and bringing them into a repository where we can manage the files themselves, kind of regardless of physical carrier, we're able to make the content more broadly accessible online and extend the useful life of the information in that physical object and carry it forward into the future. I'm going to come back to this collection in a little bit, but we'll talk about some of the other ways we're using the SDR. We've partnered with the Office of Technology and Licensing. A couple of years ago, we started this relationship with them. If you're not familiar with OTL, they take on the job of licensing the inventions that come out of some of the research that's done here at Stanford, often out of the medical school, but not exclusively. And so they realized they were storing these inventions that are increasingly digital on CDs and putting them in a file drawer and having trouble keeping track of them. So we realized that we had a real opportunity to work with them. So we bring it in and we just store it. It's dark. Nobody's going to find it. This is really important technology that we don't want to just see the light of day. That we do provide access when they've negotiated a license with, the Valley, somewhere out in the Valley or out in industry to use some of these technologies coming out of Stanford. We've been taking in dissertations and theses. It's been central to the SDR's work since we really launched our first user interface back in 2009. We've had a steady rate of adoption of SDR by institutes, centers, and interdisciplinary programs and departments for undergraduate students ever since. Every spring quarter, we have this huge onslaught of students who are getting their content in before they graduate, seniors on honor species, and every year we're getting more and more of that. So it's plays an important role in honoring the student achievements and capstone projects that are coming out of various schools and departments. We're bringing in recorded lectures, recorded conferences, performances from faculty and students. And I have an example here from CARMA. That's the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics, another corner of campus up on the knoll. We have lots of other media content coming in. I'll come back to that in a bit. But AV support is a really broad need across all departments here at Stanford, and SDR is playing an important role there. Several departments provide access to the publications that are coming out of their groups, their faculty and students, often like technical reports or working papers, articles, that sort of thing. And they've been posting them on their websites for years. And then they have to migrate their website from Dreamweaver to Drupal, say. Has anybody here done that? And then maybe to a new version of Drupal. And every time they're like carting these PDFs with them and updating the links. And at some point we started talking to people like, hey, you should put those PDFs in the SDR. You never have to you never have to move those files again. But you can just point to the persistent URLs that we provide out of the SDR. You just have to move those links with you to your next website platform. We are always going to be moving our websites. Website technology will always evolve, but the SDR's links will be persistent. So you can use the SDR to leverage your local departmental content in that fashion. Some research groups build dedicated websites. I mean, often in the course of research, data is produced, right? And we try to get those data sets into the SDR because it's important, again, from a reproducibility of experiments and research that's conducted, and just good for the long-term scholarly record of Stanford. But often these research groups, they have these really high-profile projects. They want to build whole websites that they can take to conferences and get people excited about using their data to find more discoveries in them. And so we've been, some of our curators in the libraries have been working with these research groups. They get the data deposited into the SDR through our online interface or not. Amy's going to talk more about that business soon. But then they will link directly to the files and pull them into their websites so that they can grant access directly to the data file in their own custom website, which really works for them from the way they work in their communities. This is one example, the Stanford Education Data Archive. This data, the release of this data was actually picked up by the New York Times. It was a very big deal. And so on their website, they're linking directly to our data. Much more recently, the Stanford Open Policing Project, you may have seen some articles online through the news service about this. Data from 31 states about police stops that have been recorded over a period of, I want to say, I don't know, a while. And I was going to say 31, but that's the number of states. So anyway, and for this website, it's stop.stanford.edu, but they're pulling in the data directly from the SDR. And just a cool third example, this is a little bit older, but this is a visualization that's pulling on a website, citynature.stanford.edu. It's pulling in data, again, directly from the Stanford Digital Repository service. And when you go to this web page, this visualization actually builds and right in front of your eyes, pulling the data from the SDR. It's pretty cool. And then this is a new project. It's actually just really in the very early stages. Another corner of our campus community happens to be out in Pacific Grove, the Hopkins Marine Station. If you've never been, please make a point of going there, because it's a really beautiful spot. They have a wonderful library there where they've been collecting the data that's being collected by the researchers out there. Since 1951, there was the beginning of this longitudinal project to take salinity measurements and temperature measurements and maybe some others, those are the ones I'm familiar with, and recording them. over time of the Monterey Bay. And there were other sites along the California coast doing the same thing. So we've got this amazing data set about the composition, the chemistry of our waters during a period that now has, this is an interesting data set given climate change and the impacts of it. In 1951, they were recording this all by hand, and in some cases doing these amazing watercolor depictions, drawing on the data. And so the librarian out there, Amanda Whitmire, is starting a multi-year project to digitize this, to turn it into computational data so that we can actually work with this old 1951 data. And she put up a website of her own, and I love her project goal. Digitize everything, rehouse materials in archival boxes, make content available in the SDR, convert select data from PDF to actionable format. So, really cool. So my point is that the SDR is growing. We have a tremendous amount of material there now. I realize now I forgot to put the slide in with our latest numbers. We have 375 terabytes of data in the repository, much more outside, or about the same amount outside, kind of queued up, coming in through our digitization labs and other acquisitions. About 275 million files and 1.5 million objects. So we basically double the number of objects every year. Not necessarily the data, but it's growing at a wonderful rate. I'll leave it at that. This is what I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Okay, great. So the first thing that I'm going to do a couple of sections right now, and the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is the growth of research data in the SDR. So Hannah pointed out several examples to you of some research data. I want to say that the way I think about this particular use case for the SDR is that the SDR is a way for researchers to deposit scholarly content for persistent access and discovery. So if you were a researcher and you put data in the SDR, what you're really getting out of that is that persistent web location, like Hannah mentioned. This link is never going to rot. So that, you're never going to get link rot from a Perl. The content will always be there. It's always going to be accessible. And then people will be able to find it. And the services that are built onto the SDR that enable those things to happen are, the first is sdr.stanford.edu. That is the online web application where you can go and fill out a little form with some metadata and drag and drop your files over to deposit the content. Then the Perl service, which creates these pages. I think that's the first example. This is the top of a Perl page where the metadata is displayed, and there are all the files are there that you can click and download them. That provides the persistent URL for the content, and then discovery through our library catalog searchworks, like Hannah mentioned before. I do want to point out, because it's often really, really important for researchers, the fact that the library catalog is crawled by Google, which means that you don't expect people to come to Stanford's library catalog to look for something if they're in Michigan or wherever they are, whoever they are, to look there, but they will do a Google search, and Google searches do pull up content from Stanford's Digital Repository. So I like to be clear about that. People are always like, "Oh, okay, well then I'll use it." Like, if it can't find it in a Google search, it's not of value to me, and it can. It definitely can. So Hannah was just talking about the growth of the repository as a whole. This is a reflection of how the research data collection in the repository has grown over time. So this particular service has been available for 4.5 years, and we were here 3 years ago. So the chart on the left shows the number of data items deposited. So this is, each item is equivalent to one of those Perl pages. So sometimes there's one file, sometimes there are hundreds of files, but that's equivalent to one Perl page. And then the graph on the right shows the volume of that content over time. So when we were here last year, I just like to look at this, 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we were at 2014, we were right here approximately on this graph. I would say I didn't look up what the exact number was, but like maybe 60 deposits. And now we are here, this actually goes all the way to June, that number didn't print, but 323 data items by my count. Probably, in fact, it's more because I've seen more coming in since I did this slide. It's all 2 today. And almost 6 terabytes of content, of research, of just research data. Lots of people across campus are using it. This is just a list of all the different departments and groups that have deposited research data specifically. Medical school departments, I think every engineering department except for maybe Aero, Astro, School of Arts, School of Education, School of H&S, SLAC, Hopkins Marine Station, lots and lots of people. And this doesn't include all the departments that are using it for other kinds of research related things like honor theses and articles and working papers and technical reports and other things that, some other things that Hannah's already mentioned to you. So lots and lots of people. This is going to sort of reinforce what both of us have already been saying about these persistent URLs. This is really a perfect case for why you'd want to use the SDR. So this gentleman is Malin Pinsky, and he was a graduate student working at the Hopkins Marine Station. And he worked on salmon, that's what that picture's for. So he was working on salmon and studying their locations in the Pacific Rim. In 2009, he published an article in Conservation Biology. Now, our service for research data wasn't available then. And so he made the data sets associated with this research available on his Stanford web space, which is great that he was making it available. And he put a link to that web space in the article that he published. Then he graduated, and when he left, Stanford did what they always do when you leave, which is they totally wiped out his web space, because you only get that when you're here. So they completely wiped that out. And then when anyone clicked on that link in the paper, they only got a 404 page not found error and nothing else, right? So we knew about this, and so we got the data from Dr. Pinsky, who had went to a postdoc at Princeton, I think is now at Rutgers as a faculty member. We got the data set from him, and we got it deposited into the SDR. So now, and actually, then you have to go through all this extra effort, because then we had to convince the people at Stanford who run the websites to reactivate that one link and point it to the Stanford Digital Repository, so that users would have a seamless sort of experience about accessing that content, right? They would just click on that link and they would go to where they needed to be without having to know what happened there. But you don't want to have to go through all of that trouble. The idea is that from the beginning, if you put your data sets, things that you need to make accessible into the SDR, then you won't have that problem, that they will be accessible and you won't ever have to worry about them, that link is always going to work. So I want to show you, this is, I think, a really great example of a sort of best practice around how to make sure that people are finding all of the things, all of the parts of your research that they need to find, and that as a researcher, you're meeting requirements from publishers about sharing research data and from funding agencies about sharing research data, because both of those groups have a lot of requirements these days, and the SDR can help make that, all of those requirements a lot easier to fulfill. So this is some research from Judy Prochaska. She's at the Stanford Prevention Research Center. And she was doing this study on e-cigarette use. And she published this paper. This is from 2014 in PLOS One. This is a fairly high-profile journal. Now, most of you probably know, but I will point out that when you publish an article, it's assigned a unique identifier. It's called a DOI, a digital object identifier. And that uniquely identifies that paper. So here on the paper is the DOI for that article represented there. And then within the article, these are all excerpts from this article, there's a design section, and in that design section, she has included the unique identifier for the NIH clinical trial, and so that you can find that at clinicaltrials.gov, because it's a clinical trial, and she was required to register this particular study there. And then in addition, PLOS actually has a specific data availability section, because they want people to say where the data is and how readers can get access to the data content. They've listed that all the data are available at this particular pearl.stanford.edu link, right? So she put the data in the SDR, and all of these things are linked up from the article. So if you're on the article, you can find the clinical trial, you can find the data. Same thing's true over on the Pearl page. So this is the top again of this Pearl page where her data lives. There's a Pearl URL at the very top. Down lower on this page, there's a section called bibliographic information. And in the related publications section, she's included the DOI and the link to the article at PLOS One, as well as the unique identifier and the link to the clinical trial over clinicaltrials.gov. Right. And so she's doing such a good job so far. We're at clinicaltrials.gov. This is the identifier for the clinical trial right here. This is the study. Now this clinical trial isn't finished yet. So she was required to register it when she started it or before. There's a certain window of time when it needs to be registered. But study results haven't been reported yet, not until the study is done. But down further down on the page, there's this more information section. And in there is the DOI and the link to the article. There's also, they've also allowed a mechanism for you to put links to related data sets in this section as well. It's not here yet. None of the study results are reported here, but when the study is done, I'm sure she's done such a good thorough job so far that she will be including the link to the data set on this page because she seems intent on having people find all the information they need. So this is a really, I think, nice kind of tied up very tidily example of how she is making everything available, how she's meeting her data sharing requirements from the PLOS journals, which have some some stricter data sharing requirements as far as journals go these days, and data sharing requirements for clinical studies, clinical trials with the NIH, which also are a little more thorough than some others. Yes?
So is the same information, data, content, all is it stored in like NIH, by PLOS, by CR?
Yeah, well, so sort of the point, so the question was, whether, I have to repeat the questions, whether the same data are stored by PLOS and by clinicaltrials.gov and by the SDR. So the idea with having each of these unique identifiers is that PLOS One is storing the article, and that article contains those unique identifiers that allow us to find the other information. Clinicaltrials.gov they are storing only the detailed information that they require about the clinical trial, as well as the unique identifiers for the paper and for the data set. We are storing only the data set with its unique identifier. See, by including all these connections, then everything is linked up, and we're not duplicating that effort. So if the data set needed to be updated in the SDR, it would get updated, and everybody's links would stay the same, and people would come and they would see whatever the current information is on our site, so you're not getting out of sync. What's the organization behind DOI? That's a good, I mean, it is a big organization, and I don't know what I'm looking at Hannah to see if she can say.
It's a not-for-profit organization. It's a .org. It's an international DOI foundation.
So it's an international nonprofit is what our colleague is looking up quickly.
There are DOI services, and it's actually something that we would like to do. I was going to mention that in the future section of our talk. I mean, I think what you're getting at, Tony, is it is a third-party service, right? That people are relying on, like researchers all over the place are relying on this. Will it be around for 100 years? That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of people invested in seeing that happen. But it is a really important kind of glue in keeping the scholarly web connected. Yeah, and it's durable. At one level, it's just a registry of redirects. That's one way of thinking about it, but it's a really important one. So.
Okay. Are there any other questions about this? I'm going to switch gears and talk about something else. So now's a good time. Yes.
What about data analytics? You sent I was just wondering about data. What happens if sensitive elements to things like out or requirements
right.
getting there?
So the question is about sensitive data and the SDR. So the SDR is not approved for high-risk content. So I'm just going to say that. Please don't try to upload any content with high-risk information in it into the SDR. That's a problem that everybody has. So we do have some people who will create de-identified versions of data sets in order to make some version of the content available to other people. But they may not, because of IRB requirements, be able to share the actual data set with at all. And sometimes if you strip it of all the necessary information to de-identify it, it is no longer of real use for the research, right? I mean, that happens. That's still a real problem. And as far as requirements from publishers and funding agencies, they do understand those things. And so researchers typically just have to explain to them, well, these are the reasons why we can't share this content, or we're going to share this level of content, but not this level of content. Even in clinicaltrials.gov, for example, the things that researchers are required to share there are summary data, not individual patient level data. So there are sort of different levels of these things, and if someone wants access to this sensitive content, then they can apply to the researcher who applies to their IRB for permission to share content with somebody. And it's a very one-off situation, but yeah, not through this, no. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is earthworks. So how many of you are familiar with geospatial content or GIS data? You, not everybody. Okay, so I'll do a little bit. So one of our services that's sort of built on top of the repository is Earthworks, which is for the discovery of geospatial content. This is the home page for that. And while I'm here on this, I will say that this allows people to look through this content either by searching for keywords or browsing different categories or by location. And that's really the key here, is that geospatial data is data. Geospatial data represent objects, real-world objects in space. So if you can identify its location on the planet, then it's geospatial data. We're all sitting pretty close together here, but in theory, we could identify the locations of each of the people in this room and build a geospatial data set. We can also build one that is all the buildings on Stanford's campus. But geospatial data can be countries, cities, roads, power lines, power plants, rivers, state parks, individual trees, all kinds of things. If you can find its location on the planet, then that's geospatial data. And each sort of data set like that, it's like the trees on Stanford's campus would be considered a layer. They talk about geospatial data in terms of layers, and you combine these layers to do an analysis. So a question you might ask would be, say, if you looked at the average incomes of all of the census tracts in California, that would be one layer of data. And you might combine that with another layer of data that shows the locations of all the healthcare providers in the state. And then you might do an analysis to see if there's a discrepancy or if there's any correlation between the incomes of various neighborhoods and their access to healthcare, right? Or you might postulate that poor neighborhoods have less access to good healthcare, right? And so you might do a geospatial analysis to look at that. So in the past, geospatial data has been sort of difficult to get at, and on Stanford's campus, and typically, I shouldn't say in particular, we are very typical about how we handle this content. Much of it was available in this format here on CDs. It was also, we had a lot that was available on hard drives in the staff room at the Earth Science Library. And so you had to ask a librarian if you were looking for data, you have to say, I'm interested in something like this. And they have to say, well, let me check the spreadsheet that's supposed to be the log of what's on the hard drives and see if there's anything over there. Or, these CDs might or might not have been cataloged in the library catalog, but they'd be cataloged at a global thing like, this is geospatial data about India, as opposed to the details about what's on in every layer of every file in these things. And so it was really hard to get at. So it's also harder to find data from other sources, like, well, maybe we don't have it, but maybe Berkeley has it. Asking that question at Berkeley produces the same sort of process in general, right? And the same for everybody else, right? So it's very slow. And as you can imagine, this is not a preservation strategy, CDs and hard drives, right? So we wanted to get that content someplace safe and easier for people to find the things they needed and to access the actual files. So I'm going to show you some examples of the kinds of things that are available in Earthworks now. So we have all this geospatial content. We have taken a ton of it off these hard drives and off these CDs, and we're constantly doing more to make things available. Whenever we collect anything now new, whenever we purchase anything or download geospatial content for patrons from the web that's freely available, we suck it into Earthworks. So when you go, one of the beautiful things about this is you get a preview. You can preview on the map exactly what kind of content is in the data set. So this is a data set about air monitoring stations in the state of California. This is publicly available data. And so we show you this. Geospatial data comes generally as points or lines or polygons, so as areas on a map. These are all points, the exact locations of all these air monitoring stations. These are earthquake fault lines in the Half Moon Bay. So this is an example of line content. This is also publicly available. It's from the USGS, I think, that one. This is some of that area or polygon data, also publicly available. This happens to be one of the files from our researcher, Mylan Pinsky, from a few slides back. One of the things that he had in that data set he was sharing was geospatial information. And so we have also collected the necessary metadata from him to make that content available through SearchWorks, through Earthworks, and through SearchWorks, as a matter of fact. But this is the nicer place to go, because you can just type in salmon, and this data set comes up, and then you can preview here exactly what kind of content is in this particular geospatial data set. There are maps in here. Maps are geospatial data, actual paper maps. So when we digitize maps, now we have many digitized maps. Not all of them are available through this system yet, but there are some in there. This is a map of the US from 1820. It has had something called georeferencing done to it that skews it so it overlays on the projection of the world that we're using in the system, so that Maine lines up with Maine, Florida lines up with Florida, so it makes it a little bit tweaked. We also have, as an example of content from other places, so there's content in here from Harvard and MIT and Stanford and a bunch of places that I can't remember all of. One thing you can get access to through Earthworks is Harvard's map collection, and they have a bunch of maps available online. Although I think there's something up with their server right now, because I tried to get to some the other day and somebody said, oh yeah, they did something and they need to fix it. But in general, content from other places is available through the system too. We also make available here content that we license. So Stanford buys content, and sometimes the licenses for those purchases say that we can only make it available to people at Stanford. That's the case with this particular data set. So this is a data set that shows bridges in Kabul. And I was not logged in with my student ID when I took this screenshot. So all it's showing me is that all of the content is within that box. And if I were logged in, this is a point data set. So it has points that shows where all of the bridges are. But so we do serve out licensed content as well. So if you're logged in with your student ID, you can get access to anything that the library has purchased and licensed strictly for use by Stanford. I shouldn't say anything. Everything that we've got put in there so far, but we try really hard now when we get new things to get them in the system as quickly as possible, because we're paying for it and you want it, and so that's why we're working very hard to make those things available. And before I finish up here, I just want to show you that I've been showing you these little zoomed in pieces of the records. This is what an entire record looks like, and so there's a bunch of metadata information about the content, and when you click over here in this map on any of the lines or the points or the polygons, this will pop up that shows you all of the attribute information that's in this file about that point. So in this case, there is there are some things that I'm not sure what they are. You get this, all of that in the metadata if you access the whole file. But there's, for example, a county name, Monterey. It's the site name is Salinas High School, and it has the latitude and longitude, so it's telling you information about that specific point. So you can preview sort of what the full data set of information looks like for one of these particular records. Now, if you decide that this is exactly what you were looking for and you want access to this content, up at the top is download. There's a little arrow and a little link for downloading the content. Depending on what it is, there is at least one, but sometimes several different formats that you can download the content in. So this has download shapefile. This probably also says download KML. And if it's a map, it'll say download geotip. If you work with geospatial data, you will know what those formats are, so that you can download the content directly to your local machine. Now, sometimes these files are enormous, and you might not want to put it on your local machine. You may not have room to put it on your local machine. And another thing that's available through Earthworks is web services. And so essentially what that means, which is I am not a person who is an expert at web services, but that if you're using a piece of software for geospatial analysis like ArcGIS, say, ArcGIS has the ability to take advantage of web services. So you can just tell ArcGIS, you click on that web services link and it will give you a URL. You plug that URL into the appropriate location in ArcGIS, and it will go get this data for you and pull it into ArcGIS. And so you don't actually have to download the files and move them around to different places. So it's really convenient when you're using these big data sets that you can sort of skip yourself as the middleman and basically and have the computers talk to each other. Okay, I'm going to give it back to Hannah for a little while. And does anybody have any questions about this before I do that? I'll take questions on it later too. Yes.
How's the temperature here? I feel really warm.
I'm a little warm,
It's
but.
hot, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, like, she's wearing a sweater, so I'm like, down.
Yeah, oh, I
It's
can-
really
We're gonna
It's
turn
warm.
it down. Good, okay. Sorry to interrupt. Please
If I'm
continue.
comfortable then.
Okay, good. If it gets too cold, yeah, okay.
I thought you were going to ask about the air temperature of
Yeah,
the air
that's
monitoring
right. Yeah, that's
station
right.
in Southern California. Sorry, no, that's fine. Okay, so moving on to one of the other new developments in the SDR. Actually, it was last summer, kind of in September, we released the support for audio and video streaming out of the SDR. This was a big deal for us in the libraries because we've been digitizing, we have a lot of really big audio and video collections in the library. And we've been digitizing them for preservation and kind of on-demand access for years, but then adding them to the SDR, but it was kind of like, you know, can't really, downloading a big video file isn't great. And a lot of our content, we actually can't really let to be downloaded because of so many permissions issues with audiovisual content in particular. So it was really a problem for us that we weren't able to deliver content, the vast amount of content that we had available until we added the streaming support out of SDR. So we did that last summer. I could point to lots of examples, but I was concerned about time, so I just pulled up a couple here to show. This might be Stanford's most famous piece of video ever recorded, not this particular clip, but this project ever recorded on campus. If you don't know about the Stanford Prison Experiment, go check out this exhibit, and you'll hear more about exhibits in a bit. But this was a research project conducted right in Jordan Hall. And when our current university archivist joined the libraries, top on his list of things to do was to make sure that the archival materials associated with the experiment came to the library, and he did it. And not only that, but we digitized, I think, all of the content at this point, and it's available online. Some of it is only available if you're logged in as a Stanford community member, but log in with your student ID. like we have the, you know, the story on 60 Minutes about this, but we can't stream that to the world because of rights. But all of this original source footage of this prison experiment, you can check out. It's pretty cool. And then this is an example of one of the access you were talking about, access restrictions because of, well, sensitive for privacy concerns, but intellectual property concerns are the other ones that libraries have to worry about all the time. Again, a lot of published audio material has, or archival material has rights issues associated with it. So with this development effort, this technical development effort, we're like, you know, we should really institute location-based access, and you know, really tie it down for the media, because there's certain things that we only can show at this particular workstation, or at, you know, at the music library where the music librarians are, and they can help mediate the access and that sort of thing. So this is an example of John Cage unique transcription discs. They were not pressed. They are unique writings into a disc of John Cage performed music that we have and we digitize, and you would have to log in to access it. This is an exciting development for us to be able to provide, you know, more access than we had before, and support these restricted use cases, which come up for all kinds of content. Okay, now I'm shifting to IIIF, and I'm going to do a demo if the demo gods are working with me. Now, when Amy and I first described this session today, it didn't make sense to say IIIF in the description, because most people would be like, IIIF, what is that? So we called it image analysis functionality, and I'm sure that's all why you guys came here, right? But it's funny because, I mean, that wasn't that long ago, but there's been, I'll tell you about the community in a minute, but they've been working for a while, about a year, but really lately getting very, very close to extending this technology beyond just image analysis. So IIIF stands for International Image Interoperability Framework. It's a big mouthful, so we just say IIIF. But soon that second I, the red I, is kind of, we're still going to call it IIIF, but it's going to stand for all kinds of content, including audio and video. So what is IIIF? I won't get too technical. You can read about it on the website. But I mean, in my mind, this is kind of why digital libraries are so cool, because of stuff like this. It's a framework. There's specifications, and there's different levels of them that you can conform to. But it's a way of publishing content on the web. And if you are working inside this framework, through the nature of APIs and web services, you start connecting these resources across everybody else who's also publishing content through IIIF. So for example, every scanned image that we produce, whether it's a photograph, archival manuscript, a record jacket cover, it's available from the Stanford Digital Repository as a IIIF compliant object. And so if you are halfway around the world and you are using a web interface that is IIIF compliant, you can bring in our resources in all of their resolution, all of the functionality that we are serving out, you can just bring right in. And that might seem like not that big a deal because it's the web, right? Everything's connected. But I mean, there's the extent to which you can manipulate the data with, we do virtually nothing but put this file on a server just with these technologies that go with it. But with viewers on the other end, you can manipulate this data, start annotating it, save those annotations. You can pull them up in double viewers so you can compare things from different repositories. And nobody's shipping hard drives around of these big files. You can get into the detail of paintings at the brushstroke level. And we haven't had to cart hard drives around so that researchers halfway around the world could do it. This is really, really amazing stuff. So I can do a demo. Would you like to see that? Okay. All right. Bear with me. I might need your help, Amy. That's your machine. Okay. I'm not seeing.
No, it was up here.
Okay. There. Oh.
Yeah.
Is it there? It is. Creed, thank you. That helped. The rear view mirror. Okay, how am I going to do this without seeing? Okay. So this is, Mirador is a viewer that works with IIIF resources. And Stanford helped develop this, the team that we work with over in Lathrop Library. So if you go to projectmirador.org/demo, this is just what comes up. And you can see they have this default pre-populated for you. It's a double up with a painting by Gauguin that's coming from, actually I don't remember where it's coming from. Trust me, it's not the same one, it's not the same place as the National Gallery of Art, their collection of Gauguin. But you can we did not test drive this before, that would have been good. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay.
This is on the left side.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go in. This may not project very well. You might have to try this at home. Let's compare their notes. Kind of cool, right? Can you see the brush strokes? It really, wow, pretty cool. And so I'm going to change the layout. I'm going to go get 4 panes going. Here, I pulled up a couple of images from, remember early on, I had the scanned map of Stanford. I pulled up a couple of the blueprints that are in that collection. We can compare. All right, so this is the Hoover Library, a blueprint. If you go as published through SDR, go down here. Look, it's got this IIIF drag and drop icon. So we can go, I hope the people online are, yes, I did. Okay, okay, cool. Isn't that awesome? And then we can go, oh no, it's the same one. Sorry. Well, you get the idea. No! I'm messing up my own demo. Here you go. Oh, I don't know. Sorry, I won't waste time on that anymore. But I think you get the idea that with a special viewer, you can start pulling in stuff from all over the web and start comparing it and looking at it in depth. It's super, super really cool. Started off with images for obvious reasons, but we're going to start being able to support 3D models and audio and video. So neat stuff.
And I wonder if I could just add a comment on
Please.
the center about that. I'm not quite recalling the use case, but for really old, like manuscripts, the sort of sad practice was to divide those up, and sometimes they got really radically dispersed by dealers and other people that were traveling centuries ago, so that there are pieces of the same manuscript that resided on different continents. And this viewer has been used to sort of virtually recombine these ancient manuscripts, that stuff that was in Russia and other content that was in Europe. And it's truly amazing to be able to bring all of those what was at one time a single bound manuscript together.
Yeah, that's right. That's like the penultimate use case, right? I'm just going to quickly reiterate for the people online who may not have heard. Kathy Astor, my colleague, who has worked as a book conservator, so she knows this stuff. Medieval manuscripts over the years have become disbound, and and people rip things out of pages out of libraries, if you can believe it. I can't. But and they got sold to different places, and they end up on all corners of the globe. And researchers medievalists, like, this tool enables them to reconstruct an original work without having to travel to Oxford, to Paris, to Stanford, to Harvard, where all of these pieces of manuscripts can be. So a really amazing thing. Oh, sure. Tony was asking if how do we start playing with IIIF? Well, if you can go to projectmirador.org/demo, and that will get you to the viewer. And there's a lot of examples there. I forget the actual place on that website, but they've pre-populated it with some repositories of content, so you can just play from there. And Stanford has some content there. Yep. Okay. Web archiving. So web archiving is a service that we started within the last about 3 years ago, I think. Nicholas Taylor is the service manager for that. He's not here for today, obviously, but I'm representing him. He provided this slide. As we talked about, link rot is a big problem. Websites go away. When the Obama administration, in its final days, there was a lot of web archivists getting very active online, as you can imagine. The changeovers in government are a huge time, very busy time for web archivists, because these websites just vanish. And of course, there's a lot of really important content there. So we have set up a service where we can capture content and preserve web content, and then make it accessible, again, through the SDR. We have an ongoing archiving program of the Stanford web domain. We work with university archivists on that, but also other places around campus to archive dedicated websites, and topical collections as well. We have data acquisition support for longitudinal web data. So that's, snapshots over time of websites as they change. We also work with other libraries on some important projects, again, around like political website collecting. The recent French presidential elections, as you may know, that was a very interesting time for France, and they had so many websites to track because there were so many candidates involved. That was a big deal. So you can learn more about that and contact Nicholas at the was.stanford.edu. I believe he calls that the WAS service. It always sounds like so past tense to me, but I guess that's kind of the point. And just so you know, that was Stanford University's first web page, if you've never seen it before. The blue page, everybody remembers it, who was around then, was the blue page. Okay, now I'm going to turn it back over to Amy, who's going to talk about Spotlight.
So Spotlight at Stanford is probably one of the newest services we have built on the STR, I would say. It's fairly new. Service manager for this is Kathy Astor here in the audience, so she's going to correct me when I'm wrong, and if I leave out anything she thinks is really important. Spotlight at Stanford is a service that enables librarians and curators, but also people in the Stanford community, people like yourselves, to create attractive and feature-rich websites that highlight digital collections. So that's sort of the nutshell description of this. This is the screenshot of just the top of the exhibits homepage. This is exhibits.stanford.edu. There are all of the published exhibits are represented there with the tile, and there are over 40 now, I think. 41. different exhibits that are featured there, each one of them its own separate entity. Exhibits are designed to be visually attractive, which is nice, responsive, so they work on mobile devices, and accessible. The library works fairly hard to make sure that everything that we put on the web meets accessibility requirements as much as possible. Right. When you build an exhibit, there are some things that it automatically comes with. You get a home page, you get a browse page, and I'll be showing you some examples of some of these things. You will get any number that you want of about pages and feature pages to build content for your exhibit. There are two types of ways to look through the content. One is searching. So up in the top right of the page, there's a box, there's a search box. So you can just type in terms and it will search just within the content in that exhibit. Or you can turn on the facet-based filters, which are on the left where you can limit your search. These depend on the metadata that you supply with the content, or that is supplied with the content that you have in your exhibit. You can choose which ones. This particular curator has chosen resource type, date, author, and topic. So what you're seeing here, this has been filtered down to just objects about the Black Panther Party, for example. You can also, there are a number of different search results views. This is the gallery view that you're looking at right here. There's also a list view, a masonry view, a slideshow view, and some point a map view. So for example, if you had location information associated with the content and it was entered in the metadata in the right way, then we might be able to have a map on here, and you could choose all of the images in this collection and in this photography archive that were taken in Oakland, or something like that, based on the location data. So exhibits, the Spotlight at Stanford service is really intended, it works best with content that is in the SDR. That is the best, most feature-rich way to use this particular service. And there are a number of different ways that people have already been using the Spotlight service. One of the, I think, the most obvious things to do is to create an exhibit that parallels or is a companion to a physical exhibit. And so that's what this one is. This was built to go along with the physical exhibit that was in the Green Library for the opening of the David Rumsey Map Center, which was 2 years ago now?
No, April of
was it
2016.
It was just, okay, it was last year. Okay, I was trying to remember if it had been a year or 2 years. Okay, April of 2016. Pages within this exhibit correspond to the individual display cases that were in the different areas of the gallery. Thank you. I was like, all these dual physical things, and so this was the display case on wayfinding, and then what you see here are the digital representations of the physical objects that were in that display case, and then the text is what was on the little card sitting next to each of the items in the exhibit. So this is an exact parallel to that physical exhibit, and lets that physical exhibit sort of live on over time, even though it's been taken down and replaced with something else probably twice now since then. This exhibit is still here. It was a great exhibit and really extensively curated, and the materials are spectacular. So it's really nice to have it staying with us. Another use is for providing context around these materials. So you can put together an exhibit that has a lot of materials from the SDR, and you can sort of leave it at that. But in an exhibit like this, this is the Images of Rome collection, which features print and digital objects from the print and digital collections from the Lanciani archive. That in this case, the curators have provided a lot more like contextual information about these particular objects. So it lets curators sort of better explain how those objects fit in a larger scholarly environment, if you will, of things. And so here, this exhibit includes a number of essays. This one is about the domes of Rome, and so there's a lot of content here that describes the domes of Rome, and interspersed are objects, images from the collection that are in this part of this exhibit that illustrate what's being discussed in this text. Yes, Kathy.
I just want to say something about the great example of collaboration on campus.
Yes, this is a collab. This particular exhibit was a collaboration between librarians and CESTA, which is a Center for Spatial and Textual Analysis. So yeah, so I don't know the details about that arrangement, but this wasn't just a librarian deciding to put these materials together and put them online. This was a collaborative work with this other group on campus. And it also includes, by the way, on some of the about pages, statistics about the artists, all the different artists and the ages of the works, and some other, analysis of this particular collection. So it just kinds of information that people might be interested in, not just displaying the objects themselves, but providing other information around it. Another way to use Spotlight is an excellent way to provide access to SGR content that exists across collections. So this is the research from Stanford University collection that showcases research that has been deposited in over 30 different collections in the SDR. Finding all these data sets in the library catalog can be tricky. So trying to come up with the exact sort of search terms and filters that will allow you to get specifically this set of content can be a little tough. And so this exhibit was created in order to provide an easy entry point, essentially, for people to see the scope of the content of the research data that we hold in the SDR. So it's a great way to do that. Another thing is for an instructional aid. So Stanford Libraries, as Hannah's been talking about, has a lot of rare and fragile materials, and getting access to those can be difficult. And it's really a great opportunity for our students to be able to work with all this primary source material, but access is hard, right? We don't lend those things out. For example, you can't take that back to your dorm, a medieval manuscript. So this exhibit was created for a course on the Middle Ages in order to improve students' accessibility to the content. So everything they need for the course is within this particular exhibit. And even though there may be opportunities in the class for them to go visit the real physical materials, they can look at this in their dorm room later and do further analysis on these objects. Students have also been required as part of this course to contribute to this particular exhibit, and this is an example of one of the more recent pages that was contributed by a student with information about architecture in the Dragmaticon. So it's sort of helping teach students how to write and write about and explain about these materials for a more general audience as part of their education. So Spotlight, as far as students go, Spotlight's also being piloted by some departments and programs on campus as a way for students to build e-portfolios of their work, either for a particular course or as the culmination of a course of study, to say, sort of a digital resume almost, here's what I've done, here's an essay I wrote on this, either for a particular class, descriptions of projects that they built, or what they've done. Depends on the class. It's how exactly they're using it. I don't have a published one of those to show you, but there are some that are being worked on right now that I know about. So we'll see. That's still sort of being piloted to see how it works out with the workflow for those kinds of things. But it is also being used for that. Questions about Spotlight at Stanford? Okay. And we'll talk about the future.
I don't know.
I can't see the future. No. I mean, we have a lot of ideas for what we can do in the SDR in the future, and I'm not going to talk about all of them today, but I did mention earlier the IIIF support for 3D models, 3D objects, and we are actually able to, we've begun piloting scanning here in our own labs, 3D things. We started with some archaeological bones from, it was like a faculty's collection, personal collection, that he wanted to scan it all and make it available for coursework. So we partnered with him on that, and this is not released. This is, and when I say future, I actually mean the very near future. I think we're going to release this before fall quarter starts, so that we will be able to work with, you know, you can zoom in and do cool things with 3D.
Objects in the Leland Stanford exhibit online that you can.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
Glad you could come, Kathy.
So, super near future.
Yeah. And we're starting, I think there's a tool, a project lining up to do stone tools, you know, archaeological stone tools. So things like that are really, really cool. Lots of interest on the part of students to work with this kind of material. And then I'm going to give a plug for the new online deposit system that we're going to be rolling out at sdr.stanford.edu. So for those of you who have been around for a while, and I see some of you here, you'll know that we've had an online deposit system at this URL for about 4 years, and it's, you know, it's a lot of the work that Amy has done and that students have done, and I've worked with others in the libraries to accomplish, has been using this online deposit application. But it is at this point long in the tooth in terms of technology and features, and we've learned a lot, but we're ready to do the next thing. We had a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to partner with a couple of other institutions and kind of develop the next repository for us and others to use. We call it Haiku, and we are just initiating an effort to start putting that up at Stanford. I don't have a really specific timeline at this point, but we hope to do it before the end of the year. I think, honestly, that might be ambitious at this point. We'll see, because there's some features we really want to get in before we turn it over. But it's near future. It's pretty near, and it's exciting. It's gonna it'll have a lot of this, all of the same functionality that we currently support, plus some new things that people have been adding. And then this is all part of a larger open source software community that Stanford's involved in. There's some convergence around the software that we're seeing from other institutions. And by that, I mean, a lot of people are looking for the same features in their self-deposit applications. And when you're working in an open source software community, we say, well, let's all like chip in a developer or two and build that feature, and we'll have it done by next quarter, and then we can all suck it into our repositories. So that's one of the ways that we get our work done to push our repository forward. And so we're really excited about being able to kind of stay apace with what researchers need, what librarians need, and others here at Stanford. So I saw Amy snuck in this quote at the end. Amy works a lot with faculty, and here we have, and we collect testimonials wherever we can, because it's good for business. It's good to, when we're seeking funding, we can say, see, people need this stuff. So you all probably have been meaning to do archiving of your own, so join in. Yes, Tony.
Vague idea. My vague idea is the place where it's in the universities where papers are placed in addition to their what is an institution? Does Stanford have an institutional repository? If we were to have one, would it be part of SDR? Is there?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I will repeat the question. So the question is, there's this term out in the world, institutional repository. Does Stanford have one or multiple? Some places have multiple, like Cornell has 4. Or is, you know, if we don't have one, what is SDR? Like, what, you know, where does that fit in? My answer is, and Tony, you seem to indicate or suggest that an institutional repository had physical materials, maybe as well as digital, or did you mean?
I think of it as, no, I think it was published, a place where you put the digital copy of the paper.
Oh, okay. A place where copies of published works are stored but maintained by the institution as opposed to the publisher. That is within scope of an institutional repository. I would say that the SDR in and of itself is not the institutional repository, but it serves that role. We tend not to actually host a lot of published articles. There's other repositories at institutions that do that. We often will bring in the data, as Amy was demonstrating, we'll bring in the data associated with articles, or we'll bring in like preprints. The Graduate School of Education has at openarchive.stanford.edu, they have essentially the manuscript that was accepted for publication, they post there as an open access version. But to get to your question, institutional repositories can be implemented differently for different reasons at institutions, but they generally do capture like the scholarly output of an institution, whatever that might be. And so I would say yes, SDR has that function, but you know, 3D bones of or archaeological tools, that's a little different. But it's also in the SDR. So yeah. Different schools spun up their own institutional repositories, but as you can imagine, it makes for a little bit of a chaotic situation.
We have a question from the chat.
Great.
By the thing, so I can read this. So hopefully they can hear. It's about video streaming.
Mm-hmm.
Is streamed video embeddable on web pages? Also, are there file type limitations or recommendations for video that can be streamed, M4V, MOV, etc.? Great question.
Yes, you can embed video. In fact, everything that shows up in that box, everything that's in this dark box on a Pearl page or in a Spotlight exhibit is embeddable. If you click on that little share icon, no doubt you recognize from other places on the web, it has the embed code. Yeah, you can put it in your website, you can put it in your blog, you know, whatever. In terms of video formats, yes, and we actually have some information about this posted on, so part of digitization services, the URL is like impossibly long. That's why I sighed with frustration. The Stanford Media Preservation Lab is an arm of our digitization program, our service program at Stanford Libraries. And on our website, we have guidelines for the kinds of files. I mean, it's fairly elaborate because it's kind of cover a lot of bases like video productions as well as anything. But in there, for depositing video, it has the file formats that we support for streaming. So hopefully you can find that, whoever you are, and yeah, that should answer your question.
Could you say one more time what that was, what that entity was that they should be looking for?
Stanford Media Preservation Lab. If you just Google that, you will get to our website. It's within Stanford Libraries Digitization Services. This is why the URL is so long, because it's kind of embedded within the group. And then in the left-hand navigation, there's a link to put it up. Hey.
By the way, her name is Jasmine Mulliken.
No,
I know Jasmine. I know Jasmine. I can send you an email. No.
Thanks. She said LOL, thanks. Smiley face.
Here I go again, getting lost.
And it's TMI. You know,
Yeah,
it's more like
yeah. You can find it. You can find it, or you can contact me.
We know where you are.
Yeah. Any other questions? Lisa.
I'll ask, mentioned that Google searches, but how successful, or where does it fall into the search results that are actively trying to improve how
So those first are good questions.
Yeah. So Lisa asks how Amy had mentioned that Google crawls SearchWorks, which is the library catalog, where we index everything that's in the SDR. So if Google crawls SearchWorks, it should get what's in SDR. And she asked, like, how good is that? Is it good enough? Are the SearchWorks of SDR, are the search results are they ranking high? And are we working more on that? It's a really good question. I mean, of course, the search results depend on Google's algorithm, so we don't necessarily have that much control on where they land in the results, because it's based on linking, not necessarily metadata. That said, I mean, so I think it really depends. Nan has an answer.
Because I happened to have Googled moments ago Dragmaticon because I wanted to find out what it was. And Stanford's online exhibit is the third result in Google for that. There's Wikipedia, something else, and Stanford online exhibits. So for a point of one,
Yeah, that's pretty good.
it came up, you know, in the visibility of my cell phone here. So.
Yeah.
an unusual word?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. We do make an effort in the libraries to when we get new collections released. I don't know how systematic we are about this, because there's a lot of people involved in this work. But if there's a Wikipedia entry related to the material that we're putting out there, we add a link to the Wikipedia entry, and that changes everything in terms of discovery out on the web. So think about that. In terms of improving SEO, search engine optimization, yes, and in particular the Google Scholar component. That's something that's been vexing me and some of the scholars who use SDR for years. I won't go into the details, the technical details, and why it's not as good as it could be. It's a little frustrating on Google's part, frankly. They're kind of assuming a lot about how materials are published on the web, and I don't think that's keeping up with how people are putting content out there. So, but that doesn't mean it's not a still important place to show up. So we are going to work on that with that new Haiku implementation. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question. He asked, what are the criteria to deposit in the SDR? What's that process like, and kind of what's the end-to-end, how long does that take? Does that summarize it? Anyone who's at Stanford can deposit in the SDR, but it's important to realize this is it's not for your vacation photos, which I think you all probably get after our hour-and-a-half discussion here. I mean, the intention is for scholarly content of long-term value. So researchers, students, faculty, and departments that are accumulating stuff that they want to have a long life here, we should put the stuff in the SDR. So basically, you can go to sdr.stanford.edu, and you can't just log in. We do have gated access at this point. At some point, we'll move to a more open model, but this is the way it's worked for now. If you contact us, we'll talk to you about what you're putting in. It's a useful conversation for us. Amy will attest, because we find out what's going to work best for this particular use case. People come to us with all different kinds of stuff. So it gives us a chance to kind of set you on track for being successful. If you have a lot of content to put in, and by that I mean like 8 terabytes, my data set is 8 terabytes. Like, we need to know that, because you're not gonna be able to upload that through our web portal. And then we have a different kind of conversation, and it takes longer because hard drives are involved. That's something we hope to change in the future. But if you've got, a reasonable number of files, well, I should say, if you have a reasonable amount of data, we found that anywhere from basically 8 to 12 gigabytes can be uploaded online. to like a single item in a collection. It depends, you know, your mileage might vary, it depends on bandwidth and connectivity issues, but that's been holding steady for a while. And yeah, and sometimes we have this notion of a collection with items in a collection, and sometimes if you are a researcher and you just have one data set, you don't need to create your own collection. We've got a collection that we can just invite you to, and you can become part of a pool of others who just have kind of one-offs and you just want to get it in. On the other hand, there are groups that want to set up a collection because they have multiple things they're going to add over time. So we have a couple of models of setting it up. But once you've deposited your item, it's usually published to your Perl page within an hour. Sometimes it takes longer. Again, there's other things at play that can impact that. But
it's seeming faster lately, actually.
Yeah.
So sometimes half an hour, maybe. If you had all of your information available, when you go to the app, and you know, once you've gotten access and you go to the app, if you know what the title is going to be in the description and who the authors are that need to be listed, and you can fill in that form and you have the files ready and you can drag and drop them over, this can take you like 15 minutes. And then you hit publish, you hit save, and then you hit publish, and then you wait a half an hour or an hour typically at the most. I haven't had to wait that long lately. Lately it's been really fast. So yeah, that's probably Julian's responsibility. Thank you. Then it's pretty quick. And when you ask for access, like once we have had the discussion with you that we find out you're not going to be putting in the plans for your colleague's retirement party or something like that, which somebody wanted to put in recently. Then it takes a trivial amount of time to actually set the permission. You know, once one of us finds the time in our schedule to do that, it takes very little time to set the permission, and then it doesn't take that much time for you to actually do, I guess I should say, if you have things together and organized.
In the chat, right, a link.
Stanford AV Content Guidelines.pdf.
That's the one.
Right, so in the chat, they put the URL up for, how would we describe it?
It's the guidelines for audio and video formats and kind of preparations for the SDR so that you can bring your content for streaming. Thank you, whoever did that.
Yeah.
Jasmine, thank you. Any other questions? Are you thinking about a question? You have no? Okay. You had a look. All right. Well, we're pretty much at time, so we can break. Thank you all very much for coming. Yeah. Thank you.